Judith Butler is a professor at the University of California at Berkeley, so she's a northern neighbor to us. And gender performativity is basically the theory that gender is not natural. Rather, gender is a role external to individuals, projected onto them by speech acts or discourse. So we engage in a number of illocutionary speech acts and are exposed to a number of illocutionary speech acts, which all construct a reality about gender that individuals then internalize and treat as the natural way to do gender or to perform gender. Which sounds a lot like symbolic interactionism, right? Because roles are external to individuals, projected onto them, and then internalized as the natural way things are done, and then disproportionately valued. So there's a lot that gender performativity theory borrows from symbolic interactionism and vice versa. Gender expectations become internalized because, we were saying that not only does discourse tell us the correct way to perform gender, but then people then go and internalize this. And we internalize it by way of repetition or repeated exposure to multiple messages that advocate specific gender performances. So television shows, romantic comedy movies, songs, religious discourses, all of these discourses repeat expectations for gender performance in our culture. So we're bombarded with these messages so frequently that we internalize it and take them for granted. We think, well, all of these different institutions and organizations tell me that I should perform gender a certain way, so it just must be the way things are done. These discourses don't simply describe a gendered world, they create one, and that's why they're performative. They incite us to perform gender in a certain way. So let me give you an example of performativity. How the notion of women's work in a traditional sense is performatively rendered by a bunch of different discursive fragments. So consider the following chain of discourses that create and maintain gendered expectations. And I refer to this as a chain of discourse because discourse never works by itself. It's always embedded in a sea of other discursive, or, in a sea of discourse, or every television show that you see will just provide one link in a chain that kind of ties you down to certain gendered expectations. So, for instance, sitcoms establish a system of gender-based identification that make it seem as though women naturally belong in the domestic sphere. And it's not just one television show, it's a chain of different television shows that all repeat the same message. Leave It to Beaver, I Love Lucy, The Brady Bunch, and Everybody Loves Raymond. In all of these different sitcoms, women are anchored at home, and whenever you see them, they're performing women's work. In fact, a couple of years ago, I went with a friend to the Television Arts and Sciences on Mother's Day, and they had a special event where they had a bunch of television moms from sitcoms spanning the 50s or the 60s all the way to current time with Two and a Half Men and Holland Taylor. And it was a lot of really, really, like Meredith Baxter from Family Ties, a lot of really influential sitcom moms. And a common theme that all of these women addressed during the question and answer was that even if their characters in the world of the sitcom were allowed to have a job, like Meredith Baxter on Family Ties, played a mother, and she was also an architect. But Meredith Baxter explained that they would never film her anywhere except in the home. And in fact, she had to fight with producers and directors because they always wanted her to carry laundry from one room to the next. And she said, hey, I'm supposed to be an architect. Can I carry blueprints with me? And she had to fight tooth and nail. Another example would be in The Cosby Show. If you've seen reruns of The Cosby Show on Nick at Night, you have two professionals. Bill Cosby's character is an OBGYN, and then Claire Huxtable on the television show is an attorney. And whereas you do see several scenes where Cliff Huxtable, the Bill Cosby character, is talking to women in the context of his office, very rarely, if ever, I think there was one scene that I can remember, do you see Claire Huxtable in her job atmosphere, like in a courtroom. So even women who are successful and professional and super women in the context of a sitcom, you rarely see them in the public sphere or working. So that's one chain discourse that's reinforced by other discursive chains. So other forms of gendered discourse reinforce these images that we see in sitcoms. So for instance, when we're watching television and we're watching these sitcoms, we'll be exposed to a number of different commercials that reinforce the message that women's work is really the work that is done at home. So home care commercials almost exclusively feature women. Food product commercials almost exclusively feature women as the person who prepares food. So what all of these things taken together do is reinforce the idea that a woman's place is in the home. And again, it's not just a sitcom image, but it's a bunch of different images and discourses working in concert to convince us this is where women belong. So that is gender performativity in a nutshell. Gender performativity, again, is the idea that not only does the discourse around us reflect a reality, it constructs a reality that we then internalize through acts of repetition, and then we end up performing the gender role models that we see in advertisements, in books, in television shows, in movies, and in music. So not only are these forms of entertainment, but they're also cultural scripts that people perform. Gender, in other words, is more than just some type of characteristic of our identity. It is actually a performance, complete with characters and scripts and casting.